The one thing that always drives me nuts, and I think you appreciate it as well because you sent me this paper. The Second Amendment didn't happen in a vacuum. People think like it just came out of nowhere, like they just kind of pulled it out of their hat and they were like, oh, it's the militia. That's it. That's the whole,
Right.
that's it. That's the whole analysis of the Second Amendment. Um, Not to toot my own horn, but my law review note was actually all about the Second Amendment. And I had an amazing time going down the rabbit hole of seeing how deep and entrenched, where does the Second Amendment come from? Why do we even have a Second Amendment? And it comes down to this idea that years before, we go all the way back to the ideas of individualism, the ideas of natural rights, of John Locke and Adam Smith, and all that, of this idea of preservation. You have the ultimate right. One, you need to preserve your liberty, and two, how do you preserve that liberty? You have to be able to protect yourself out in nature. Those are two natural rights and natural laws that should never be violated. You have a right to liberty. You have a right to defend yourself, so no one infringes upon that liberty. Fast
Well, it's
forward
your
to
ultimate. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
go
Go
ahead.
ahead. It's. I'm just saying it's your ultimate right and responsibility. Whose ultimate responsibility is, for your safety? It relies on you.
Yeah,
You cannot divorce yourself from that responsibility for your own life. It just does not work that way. I've said it before when you had me before. There is no amount of money that in the world that you can pay someone to step in front of you and take a bullet for you.
yeah,
It just cannot happen. There's no police force. There's no police lieutenant or whatever that can tell, mandate one of their officers go stand in front of this person and take the bullets for him.
that never
It
happened.
just doesn't work that way.
Um, yeah, and then moving up through history, in American history, even post revolution, there was this period
Mm-hmm.
between when we won the revolution, the Revolutionary War, and when we actually had a constitution. There was a big swath of time. There's the Articles of Confederation. We had all these state constitutions, and you look at all these state constitutions, like you had mentioned earlier in the show. You have all these state constitutions. Pennsylvania is one that comes to mind. I think Maryland as well. Pennsylvania probably the strongest Second Amendment equivalent, which was saying basically, in order to the right to preserve oneself, it was even saying to preserve oneself, one has the right to arm themselves. And that's where they got the idea from. They looked at all these amendment or these constitutions and said, hey, there's a trend here in all these state constitutions that we want to preserve our liberty and preserve ourselves. Therefore, we're going to give people the right to arm themselves. So it didn't happen in a vacuum. And it always drives me nuts when you have these leftists who just go, oh, it's the militia. See, if you dumb right wingers, you don't understand. It's all about the militia. Now, like, crack a book and read some history lessons a little bit, because this is ridiculous that you think, oh, I just read it. It's militia. That's it. Nothing happened before. Nothing happened after. History in my mind happens in a vacuum. So that's it. Case closed. And it's like, nah, there's so much going on. And the fact that this philosopher, this Italian philosopher, Beccaria, was talking about this how many years before the revolution in America happened, that he inspired people like John Madison and Thomas Jefferson, who put this stuff into the Constitution, just shows it didn't happen in a vacuum. So,
Mm-hmm.
Thank
historical
you.
rant over.
No,
Um,
thank you. I appreciate that because people seem to think that like the founding fathers got together one night and just drafted something over beers or something, and that's what it was. They don't realize, like, they do need to go through the history of it, that there was months and months of these debates, and they had these different teams, and like it was these like forever, and then it almost didn't happen because there was the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, and
Right.
like one group wanted the Bill of Rights and everything, and they weren't going to agree to the Constitution until they got the Bill of Rights, and this was
mhm.
literally not some just quick overnight thing. This was months of debates with people who disagreed and disagreed and disagreed until they could come up with what is for everyone, what is for everyone, what is for everyone. And then even George Washington, in his farewell speech, said, if in the opinion of the people, the distribution or modification of the constitutional powers be in any particular wrong, let it be corrected by an amendment. in the way which the Constitution designates. But let there be no change by usurpation, for though this, in one instance, may be the instrument of good, it is the customary weapon by which free governments are destroyed. And I just think that's such a powerful statement
Yeah.
to go back to. We can't just be so quick to amend the Constitution just because someone has what may be a good idea in a moment. And I realize Gavin's been talking about this for a couple of years, but 4 years in the grand scheme of hundreds of years is nothing.
Yeah. I mean, our whole constitutional republic took how many hundreds of years from those seedlings of ideas and philosophy, like John Locke and Beccaria, to slowly make their way to different thinkers and people who then started this revolution, who then started a country. Like, it took hundreds of years to even get to that point. So to just kind of disregard that, and all history has a long arc to it. It doesn't happen overnight. The Constitution was not, it was not like a college group project and they were rushing at a deadline to kind of figure it out at the last minute. It took all their teachings and their learnings and their readings and their debates and their upbringings and their culture. And it took a long time for them to come to the table after what was, and you can argue whether it was a failed system or not, the Articles of Confederation. And then they said, okay, well, this didn't work, so let's try something different. But but yeah, so this whole idea that it just came out of nowhere for the militia drives me absolutely nuts, because it just shows the lack of, once you say that, if I'm talking to you about the Second Amendment and that's your answer, it's the old, oh, it's about the militia, bruh. It's not even about like you owning a gun. Then I'm like, you don't know anything. You don't know anything. You don't
They
know anything
said it
about
was supposed to be regulated.
Yeah, it says regulated, bruh. So that means I could regulate it.
Yeah.
I could regulate
Are we
your right
allowed
of way.